There's a secret the sea once kept, a secret so bold, so impossible, that even hardened pirates swore it couldn't be true. Imagine this, a woman living in an age when the ocean belonged to men, carving her place with sword and pistol, standing shoulder to shoulder with killers and thieves. Yet no one around her suspected who she truly was. This was Mary Read, the pirate who wore a mask, not of cloth, but of identity itself. She fought, drank, cursed, and bled like any sailor yet beneath the coarse linen. Shirt and salt-stained breeches beat the heart of someone who had been forced to hide in plain sight just to survive. Mary's disguise was more than a trick of clothing. It was a performance she carried from childhood, trained in deception, hardened by necessity, and sharpened by every danger the sea hurled at her. She fooled captains, shipmates, and enemies alike. But here's the dangerous part. Once she joined forces with the notorious Bonny and Calico Jack Rackham, her disguise didn't just protect her, it became her weapon. Few knew her secret, and fewer still lived long enough to spread it. Think about it on a creaking deck drenched with blood and rain. Mary Read would lock eyes with her foes, blade in hand. And the last thought that flickered through their minds was not that they'd been struck down by a woman, but by a pirate as ruthless as any devil that sailed the Caribbean. And that was exactly how she wanted it. But how did she maintain the ruse? How did Mary Read, a woman in a world that denied her very presence, weave a disguise so convincing that she became one of piracy's most feared legends? That's the secret history you were never meant to know, and tonight I'll take you below deck into her hidden world, because Mary's greatest battle wasn't against the Navy or rival pirates. It was against discovery itself, and it all began the night she chose to wear a man's name as her armor. From the very beginning, Mary Read's life was stitched together from secrets, for she entered the world not as a child celebrated, but as a burden concealed. Her mother, widowed and desperate, found herself with no means to provide. And when Mary's older brother, her only son, the family's last hope, died in infancy, the woman was faced with ruin. But where honest work failed, deception took root. And so she clothed Mary in her dead brother's garments, cut her hair short, and passed her daughter off as the boy who should have lived. It was not merely a disguise, it was survival. For the grandmother who controlled the family purse would only send coin if she believed her grandson still drew breath. And so the lie began. Mary learned early how to walk with the stiff gait of a boy, to lower her voice, to scowl instead of smile. Each day was a rehearsal, and each glance from her suspicious grandmother was a test. She passed them all. By the time she could run, she had already mastered the art of being someone else. But disguises, once donned, are hard to remove. Mary's childhood bled into adolescence, and though the ruse began as her mother's invention, it became her armor. She worked as a footboy, then as an apprentice in trades barred to women, and each new role carved steel into her soul. She learned the roughness of men's talk, the swagger of their walk, the weight of fists when words failed. Keep your head down, keep your secret, her mother urged, but Mary was already learning a different lesson, that the world offered her nothing unless she seized it with both hands. And so she seized. The sea came calling soon after, as it always does for those restless enough to follow it. Mary enlisted under her assumed identity, serving in ships that crisscrossed the English Channel, hauling goods, carrying soldiers, and braving storms. She proved herself quick to climb rigging, quicker still with a blade. No one suspected the truth, for Mary had become her disguise. She spat with the men, drank their grog, cursed the captains, and bore her scars without complaint. But beneath the bravado lay a simmering fire. She knew her place in the world was borrowed, fragile, and she carried the fear that one slip, one accidental glance would shatter it all. And yet that fear made her sharper, more cunning. Each day she lived undetected was a victory. Each fight she won was proof that she belonged, not as Mary, but as the man the world demanded she be. But the seas were not the only battlefield. War loomed across Europe, and Mary, still bound in disguise, enlisted in the army of Flanders. Imagine it, a woman in men's boots, musket in hand, standing shoulder to shoulder with soldiers who would have scorned or slain her had they known. She marched, bled, and killed under their banners, her disguise not merely holding but thriving. It was in this crucible of war that she learned the ferocity that would one day make her a pirate feared across the Caribbean. And it was also there, in the fire and mud, that Mary's first disguise nearly shattered. For war breeds not only blood but intimacy, and among her fellow soldiers she formed bonds too close to maintain her secret forever. There was a man she admired, a comrade whose trust she earned in battle. But admiration turned to affection, and affection to a dangerous slip. When he discovered her truth, she feared the end, but instead, he swore to protect her secret. Together they fled the army, chasing dreams of peace. They married quietly, she discarding her disguise for the first time in years. For a brief span, Mary Read lived as herself. But fate, cruel as it is to those who defy it, cut that happiness short. Her husband died, leaving her widowed young, and once more she donned the disguise that had carried her through life. She returned to the sea, hardened now by loss, and sharper still in her deception. If once she had lived in disguise out of necessity, now she wore it like a blade, wielded it as both shield and weapon. No longer merely surviving, Mary was planning, watching, waiting. The world had taught her that honesty was a cage, but disguised disguise was freedom. She had lived as a soldier, as a husband's wife, as a sailor, and soon she would live as something greater still, a pirate. But before she would hoist the black flag and carve her name into history, Mary Read had to take one final step deeper into her masquerade, one that would bring her face to face with Bonny, with Calico Jack, and with the truth that a disguise, once worn too long, becomes more real than the face beneath. Mary Read's return to the sea after her brief, tragic taste of love was not the step of a grieving widow, but the march of someone hardened by loss. Someone who had learned that the world punished women for existing, but rewarded cunning and ferocity when disguised in a man's skin. And so once again she cut her hair, bound her chest, and pulled on the breeches and coarse shirts that had fooled the world before, slipping back into her second self with the ease of one slipping into old armor. And she found work aboard merchantmen that crisscrossed the Atlantic, hauling sugar, rum, and slaves, ships fat with profit but vulnerable to storms and cutthroats. And though she worked with silent determination, her eyes sharp, her muscles hardened by years of toil, Mary was restless. Her disguise, more than survival now, it was a hunger, a weapon, a persona that allowed her to step into worlds forbidden to her true name. On one such voyage, when a French privateer bore down on her ship, cannon smoke blotting out the horizon, Mary fought with a fury that startled her crewmates, musket at her shoulder, blade flashing in close quarters. And when the French were beaten back, the captain clapped her on the shoulder and roared, "By God, lad, you've the devil's fire in you." She only nodded, her secret safe, her heart pounding with the thrill of survival and the knowledge that her mask was stronger than ever. Yet fate, like the sea, never allows calm for long. And soon Mary's path bent toward the one world where her disguise would not only protect her, but would elevate her. Piracy, it happened when her merchant vessel, heavy with goods, was taken by a brig under the black flag. Its sails dark against the sky, skull and bones flapping like a grin in the wind. The pirates swarmed aboard with cutlasses drawn, pistols blazing. And though the merchant crew fought valiantly, they were outnumbered, their captain slain, their decks painted with blood. Mary, caught in the press, fought like a demon, striking down a pirate who lunged at her with a knife. Her ferocity caught the eye of the pirate captain, a man named Calico Jack Rackham, who stood on the quarterdeck with pistols at his belt. His coat brilliant with stolen cloth, his face a mix of amusement and calculation. "Hold, there," he shouted when his men raised blades to cut her down. "This one's got fight. Let him live. Men with iron in their veins are worth more than 10 cravens." And so Mary Reed, still cloaked in her disguise, was spared the sword and offered a place among Rackham's crew. She accepted without hesitation, knowing that the life she had lived until then of toil, loss, and deception had been only a prelude to this moment. She had crossed the threshold into piracy, and there was no going back. The Revenge, Rackham's brig, became her new home, a floating world of violence, greed, and freedom. Among the crew she carved her place with steel and cunning, proving herself in raids against merchantmen, in duels on deck, in nights of drunken camaraderie when she drank as deeply as any man and cursed louder still. Her secret held, for no one suspected the truth beneath her breeches, not even when she bested men twice her size in brawls, or leapt into boarding parties with fearless abandon. She was just another pirate, truthless, cunning, alive. But secrets do not remain secrets forever. And it was among Rackham's crew that Mary's greatest test began, for not long after joining. She found herself locked in an unspoken rivalry with another new recruit, Bonny. Anne was unlike any woman Mary had ever known. Bold, fiery-haired, her disguise less about hiding than about daring the world to challenge her. Where Mary's mask was necessity, Anne's was defiance. She moved among the men not as one of them, but as someone who demanded respect, her tongue as sharp as her dagger. At first Mary viewed her with suspicion, fearing discovery, but soon that suspicion turned to fascination. They fought side by side in raids, blades flashing in tandem, and a bond grew between them, bond that danced on the edge of something deeper, though neither dared name it aloud. Anne was one of the few who pierced Mary's disguise, seeing through the layers of cloth and bravado. In the dim light of the hold, one night, Anne leaned close and whispered, "You're not what you seem, are you?" Mary froze, her heart hammering, ready to deny, to fight, to kill if she must. But Anne only smiled, her green eyes glinting. "Don't worry. Your secret's safe with me. The sea has room for all kinds of devils." From that night on, they were inseparable, sisters in disguise, comrades in blood. But secrecy breeds danger as surely as gold breeds greed. Some of the crew began to whisper about the strange closeness between the two, and whispers on a pirate ship are as deadly as cannon fire. One drunken sailor jeered, "What are you two, married?" And Anne, quicker with her dagger than with words, silenced him with a slash that left his cheek in ribbons. The message was clear: mock them at your peril. Yet the suspicion lingered, and Mary knew that discovery could mean death, not only hers, but Anne's as well. Still, they pressed on, fighting and plundering, living each day as though it were their last, and in truth, aboard a pirate ship. It often was. It was during a raid off the coast of Cuba that Mary's disguise nearly shattered. The crew had boarded a fat Spanish merchantman, the decks awash with blood. When Mary found herself cornered by a Spanish officer wielding a rapier, they clashed amid the chaos, steel ringing, and though Mary fought with skill, the officer pressed her hard, driving her back toward the rail. Desperation surged, and in that moment Mary tore off her hat, her hair spilling loose, her face bared. The officer's eyes widened in shock. The brief hesitation, all she needed, her blade struck true, and he fell. But the damage was done. A handful of pirates nearby saw what the officer had seen, and their eyes went wide. Mary stood, chest heaving, blade dripping, daring them to speak. For a heartbeat the deck was silent. Then one laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "By God, she fights like a man, so what does it matter?" Another added, "If she can spill Spanish blood, let her stay." And just like that, her secret became legend. She was no longer a man in disguise. She was Mary Reed, pirate, fighter, survivor. And though some grumbled, none dared challenge her, for she had proved herself in blood. From that day, Mary no longer hid completely, though she still dressed as a man in most raids, shifting between selves as the situation demanded. With Anne by her side and Rackham's begrudging respect, she carved her place into the story of piracy itself. But every victory only brought them closer to the reckoning all pirates face. The Navy hunted them, storms battered them, and betrayal lurked among their own. And Mary knew that the greatest disguise in the world could not shield her forever, not from musket balls, not from the gallows, not from fate itself. And it was fate that came calling one fateful night when the Revenge anchored off Jamaica, its crew drunk and careless, the decks echoing with laughter and song. In the shadows, sails loomed, Royal Navy, silent, waiting. And as the first cannons roared, Mary leaped to arms, cutlass flashing, her disguise forgotten, her true self blazing brighter than any falsehood. For the final act of her story had begun, and this time, no disguise would save her. The seas between Jamaica and Hispaniola became Mary Reed's crucible. For aboard Calico Jack's brig, the Revenge, every raid, every storm, every drunken quarrel was another test of her resolve, another chance for her disguise to either hold or collapse. And though her secret had been glimpsed by some and guarded by an, Mary learned quickly that among pirates there was only one truth that mattered: strength. And she wielded it with a fury that startled even the most hardened cutthroats. Yet strength alone was not enough, for pirates were men bound less by loyalty than by opportunity. And each day Mary had to earn her place anew, standing shoulder to shoulder with killers who measured worth in blood spilled and booty taken. The sea became her stage, and she her own actor, donning and shedding her disguise as the tides demanded, sometimes striding as a swaggering young man with hat pulled low, musket slung, sometimes stepping into herself when the crew had already drunk too deeply to care. When Anne was by her side and Rackham too charmed by rum to command order. But danger crept always, not only from the cannons of the Spanish or the muskets of the English, but from within, for suspicion gnawed like a rat in the dark. There were whispers, always whispers, that two women sailed among them, not concubines or captives, but equals, blades as sharp as any man's. And though some laughed it off, others spat and muttered of curses, of ill omens, of the gallows that surely waited for a ship that defied nature itself. It was in those days that Mary began to taste what it meant not merely to live disguised, but to live feared. During a boarding near Cuba, when a Spanish brig loaded with sugar tried to flee, the Revenge bore down, her cannons tearing holes through the stern, and the pirates swarmed aboard. Mary led the charge, cutlass flashing, musket smoke stinging her eyes, her boots slipping on blood. One Spaniard lunged, blade gleaming, and she parried with a ferocity that startled him, her eyes burning, her breath ragged. "You'll not take me," she roared, and when her blade struck true, his scream carried across the deck. The other pirates saw, and in that moment her reputation, hardened Mary Read, was no longer a secret in breeches. She was a devil in flesh, a pirate who killed without hesitation. And though they might mutter in private, none dared cross her in battle. Even Rackham, swaggering and vain, began to look at her with something like wary respect, for he knew that discipline among pirates was a fragile thread, and men like Mary and Anne, who bled beside the crew, held more sway than any captain's word. Yet piracy was never only blood, it was also drink, dice, and the slow erosion of men's souls. Nights on the Revenge were long with rum, the deck echoing with songs and curses, laughter curdling into brawls. Mary played her part as one of the men, tankard in hand, curses spilling from her lips. Yet in the corner of her mind a constant awareness lingered. One slip, one gesture too soft, one laugh too light, and the illusion would fracture. Still, she began to find a strange kinship with the crew, bonds forged not of trust but of survival. She fought beside them, bled beside them, and though they might never know her truth, she had earned a brotherhood of sorts. One night, a sailor named Duffy, scarred and half-toothless, clapped her on the back and slurred, "You're a devil, lad, but I'd rather have you at my side than 10 cowards. Whatever you are, you're one of us." Mary laughed, though the words cut deeper than he knew, for in them lay a paradox. She was both one of them and apart, both brother and stranger, but not all bonds aboard were so easy. Her closeness with Anne deepened, their whispered conversations in the dark holds, their laughter amid the chaos of raids, their shared glances when the men grew too rowdy. It was a dangerous closeness, one that fueled both suspicion and jealousy. Rackham, notorious for his vanity, grew restless watching them, for though he took Anne as his lover, he could not stomach the thought that her attention strayed toward another, even one he believed a man. Tension simmered, boiling over one night when Rackham, drunk on rum and pride, cornered Mary on deck. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he sneered, his hand on the hilt of his cutlass. "Anne's loyalty is mine, and if you cross me, I'll see you fed to the sharks." Mary, her hand resting on her own blade, met his glare without flinching. "I fight for this crew as much as you," she said, her voice low, steady. "If you want me gone, you'll have to kill me. But know this, I'll not go down alone." For a heartbeat, silence hung, broken only by the slap of waves against the hull. Then Rackham laughed, sharp and cruel, and turned away. "Keep your blade sharp, then, lad. You'll need it." The tension remained, an undercurrent beneath every raid, every toast, every whisper in the night. It was not long after that the Revenge faced her most perilous battle yet. A clash with a heavily armed English sloop that had been hunting pirates along the Jamaican coast. The fight was brutal, cannonballs tearing through rigging, muskets cracking across decks. Mary, at the forefront, fought like one possessed, her cutlass flashing, her pistol barking smoke and fire. Anne was at her side, blood streaking her face, her laughter wild. will not die caged," she shouted, parrying a blow, her hair whipping in the wind. The crew, spurred by their ferocity, pressed harder, driving back the English boarders until the deck was a slaughterhouse of blood and broken bodies. When at last the sloop broke off, limping into the horizon, the pirates cheered, their victory a roar against the heavens. But in the aftermath, as the wounded groaned and the dead were cast into the sea, Mary felt a weight settle in her chest. They had won this day, yes, but the English would not stop, nor the Spanish, nor the sea itself. Every victory drew them closer to the gallows, and she knew, deep down, that fate had already written her end. Still, she fought, she drank, she laughed, she lived. Each day was a gamble, each night a stolen reprieve, and yet, as the Revenge sailed deeper into waters prowled by hunters, as the crew grew lazier, drunker, louder, Mary felt the shadow of fate lengthen. She had built her life upon disguise, upon secrets and blades, but the sea has a way of stripping men and women bare. And one night, as storm clouds gathered and the wind howled through the rigging, a lookout cried from the mast, "Sails!" To the east. Lanterns flickered in the distance, growing larger, closer, relentless. The Navy was upon them again, and this time Mary knew, with the certainty of one who had stared into fate's eyes before, that the sea had come to collect its due. The sails that appeared on the horizon that night were not merchantmen fat with sugar and silver, nor lumbering galleons ripe for plunder, but the clean, sharp outlines of His Majesty's Navy, their canvas glowing ghostly in the moonlight, their prows cutting the black water like blades, and as the cry of sails east echoed down from the masthead, the Revenge's crew scrambled to arms. Some still drunk, some still half asleep, fumbling for pistols and cutlasses, while Mary tightened the strap of her baldric, her eyes narrowing, for she knew that this was no mere chase but a reckoning long promised, the gallows themselves riding on the wind toward them. Rackham staggered from his cabin, coat askew, eyes bloodshot with rum, and barked orders that slurred as much as they commanded. "Load the cannons, show them what we're made of." But Mary saw the hesitation in the men's eyes, saw how many of them gripped their weapons with trembling hands, their bravado drowned in drink, and for the first time she felt the deep chill of despair settle in her bones. The knowledge that courage alone could not outmatch discipline and numbers. Still, she shouted, her voice slicing through the chaos, "Stand firm. The Navy's not come to drink with us. They've come to hang us." And her words, sharp as a blade, stoked fire in some hearts, though others only cursed and fumbled. As the Navy ships drew closer, their cannons already protruding from the gun ports, like the teeth of predators, the Revenge lurched forward, sails strained. But she was a brig built for speed and cunning, not for outgunning a warship, and every man and woman aboard knew it. And Bonny appeared at Mary's side, her red hair wild in the wind, a pistol in each hand, her grin savage. "Well," she shouted over the roar of the surf, "if they want us, they'll have to bleed for us." Mary met her eyes, a fierce grin flashing despite the fear gnawing in her gut. "Let's give them a fight they'll remember in hell," she answered, and with that, the deck erupted in smoke and thunder as the first cannon roared. The battle was chaos splinters exploding, smoke choking the air, the sea alight with flashes of fire. The Revenge fired back desperately, her smaller cannons belching smoke. But the Navy returned with precision, every shot smashing through rigging, shredding sails, splintering the deck. Men screamed as iron tore through flesh. Bodies toppled into the sea with cries cut short by the waves. Mary fought at the forefront, musket cracking, blades slashing, her body moving on instinct, every breath a prayer and a curse. She saw Anne in the thick of it, her pistols blazing, her laughter wild, like a flame daring the storm to snuff her out. Rackham barked from the quarterdeck, but his voice was drowned by cannon fire and the clash of steel. His presence more shadow than substance, his courage slipping away with every broadside. At one point, when the Navy attempted to board, Mary led the countercharge, her cutlass gleaming red in the lantern light, her roar echoing, "No quarter for cowards," and the ferocity of her blade cut down to borders before a musket ball tore past her shoulder, grazing her flesh with fire. She stumbled but rose again, teeth clenched, blood dripping down her arm, for to falter now was to die. Yet even as they fought, it became clear the revenge could not hold. The Navy's discipline, their numbers, their sheer force pressed harder and harder, until the pirates were driven back step by bloody step. And then came the moment that sealed their fate. Rackham, his face pale, eyes wide with terror, abandoned the fight. With a handful of loyalists, he fled below deck, leaving Mary and Anne to stand with the few who still fought. Mary's fury burned hotter than the gunpowder. Cowards. She spat, cutting down another sailor. Come out and fight, or die hiding like rats. But Rackham did not emerge, and the crew, seeing their captain's cowardice, faltered. Some threw down their weapons, raising hands in surrender, their cries drowned by the crash of waves and the crack of muskets. Mary turned to Anne, her chest heaving, sweat and blood mixing on her face. "It's us then," she said. Anne's grin never wavered. "Better us than them," she replied, and together they fought like demons, their blades flashing, their defiance so fierce that even the hardened Navy men hesitated, muttering of devils in women's skins. But the end came swift as it must. Overwhelmed, battered, bleeding, Mary and Anne were finally subdued. Their cutlasses ripped from their hands, their bodies dragged across the blood-slick deck, wrists bound in rough rope. As the Navy captain surveyed the wreckage, he looked at the two women with something between awe and disgust. "By God," he muttered, "you fought harder than the lot of them combined." But respect could not save them. The prisoners were gathered, their heads bowed, their eyes hollow, and in the darkness Mary heard one of the men sobbing. It was Rackham, dragged from his hiding place, his face streaked with tears. Anne spat at him, her voice dripping with contempt. "Had you fought like a man, you needn't die like a dog." The words cut deeper than any blade, sealing Rackham's shame forever. They were taken in chains to Port Royal, the infamous city of gallows and graves, where the scent of tar and sweat mixed with salt and rot. Crowds jeered as the pirates were paraded through the streets, children hurling stones, women spitting curses, men laughing at the fallen devils who had once terrorized their seas. Mary walked with her head high, her eyes hard, refusing to give them the satisfaction of shame. Beside her, Anne was equally unbowed, though the chains bit into their flesh with every step. They were thrown into the dank cells of the jail, their future as certain as the sunrise. Trial, sentence, rope. And yet, even there, Mary's disguise clung to her, for some still muttered in disbelief that women had stood among pirates, fought harder than men, carved their names in blood. The trial came swiftly, the courtroom crowded with spectators eager to watch pirates condemned. Rackham was sentenced first, his cowardice mocked even as the noose was prepared. Mary and Anne followed, their identities revealed to gasps and whispers. The magistrate sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. You, who wore breeches and fought as men, shall hang as men. But Mary and Anne, bound but unbroken, did not weep or beg. Instead, Mary's voice cut through the murmurs. Sharp as a blade, we may look like women, but we fought like men and more. The sentence was death by hanging. Yet, in the darkness of their cell, Mary and Anne shared a secret, a final weapon to wield against the gallows. For both were with child, their bodies carrying the lives of those who might yet give them reprieve. And in that time, the law forbade the hanging of pregnant women. Their bellies became shields, their unborn children stay ropes against the noose. Word spread, and the city buzzed with shock and fascination. Pirates, pregnant and defiant, awaiting judgment not only for themselves, but for the lives they carried. The gallows loomed, the ropes swayed in the wind, but for a brief moment fate itself was stayed. And as Mary lay in the darkness, the chains heavy on her wrists, she whispered to Anne, "We've cheated death before. Perhaps we'll cheat it again." Anne smiled faintly, her eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Or perhaps," she said, "death is simply waiting for us to finish the game." And with those words, silence fell between them, the gallows creaking in the night wind outside. A grim reminder that time was running out. The jail at Port Royal was a place where hope went to rot, its stones slick with damp, its air thick with the stench of unwashed bodies and despair. And into its belly Mary, Reed, and Anne Bonny were thrown, chains rattling with each step. Their bodies bruised from battle and capture, but their spirits still unbroken. For though the trial had condemned them, their pregnancy had bought them time. And time in a dungeon is a cruel gift, filled with whispers, shadows, and the gnawing uncertainty of what fate might yet decide. And there, in the flickering torchlight of the cells, the two women clung to each other's company, trading words like weapons, refusing to let the silence crush them. Rackham, once a captain feared, was dragged past their cell days before his hanging, his face pale and broken, his eyes hollow. Calico Jack Anne spat through the bars, her voice cutting through the stink of despair. "If you'd fought like a man, you wouldn't die like a dog." He flinched, but no words came. And when he was taken to the gallows the next morning, the crowd jeered and the rope did its work, leaving his name a cautionary tale rather than a legend. Mary and Anne listened to the distant roar of the mob and the snap of rope. And though they had despised Rackham's cowardice, they felt the chill of death's shadow settle closer, the reminder that the noose would soon seek their necks as well. Yet even there, Mary's fire did not die. "We've cheated death before," she told Anne, her hand clenched into a fist, "and we'll cheat it again. I'll not hang for living as I chose." Anne met her gaze, her own eyes glinting like steel. "Then we'll fight death itself, Mary, and if we lose, at least we'll not go quiet." The days bled together, measured by the footsteps of guards, the rattling of chains, the cries of other prisoners dragged to their doom. Rumors seeped into the cells like smoke. Some said the governor was tempted to make an example of them despite their condition. Others whispered that wealthy planters, scandalized yet fascinated, argued that the women's lives should be spared for the curiosity of their story, while still others muttered that the unborn children would die in the wombs of sinners, cursed before they even drew breath. Mary laughed bitterly at such talk, spitting onto the straw-strewn floor. "They fear us even now," she said. "Two women who lived as men, fought as pirates, loved as we pleased. They'd rather see us erased than admit we existed. Anne, quieter, rested her hand on her belly, her voice soft. Let them fear. Fear is the only truth we've ever given them. Yet beneath the bravado, the prison took its toll. The food was thin gruel crawling with vermin, the water stale, the nights alive with screams and moans. Fever swept through the jail like a storm, and men died daily, their bodies dragged out at dawn, leaving empty chains to rattle in the silence. Mary fought the sickness with the same ferocity she fought everything else, clinging to strength, to anger, to the will that had carried her across oceans. But even steel bends when hammered long enough, and soon she felt the fire in her blood turn against her. A fever that burned her from the inside, her body weakening, her breath ragged. Anne tended to her as best she could, wetting cloths, whispering defiance. "You'll not die here, Mary," she said, her voice trembling with both fury and fear. "You've too much fight left in you." But Mary, her face pale in the dim light, managed a faint, bitter smile. "I've fought all my life, Anne. Perhaps the sea finally wants me back." The fever worsened, and Mary drifted between delirium and lucidity, her mind slipping into memories like a ship caught in a storm, her mother dressing her in her brother's clothes. The first time she raised a musket, the battlefield of Flanders. The moment Anne whispered she knew her secret. The taste of salt and blood on the deck of the Revenge. She dreamed of ships aflame, of coins spilling through her fingers like sand, of the gallows looming high against the sky. In her lucid moments, she spoke to Anne, her voice faint but fierce. "Promise me," she whispered, gripping Anne's wrist with surprising strength. "Promise me you'll not let them bury me nameless. Promise me you'll tell them I was Mary Reed, pirate, fighter, woman, and that I lived as I chose." Anne's eyes shone with tears she refused to let fall. "I promise," she said, "and I'll carve your name into their bones if I must." But Mary shook her head, a faint laugh rattling her chest. "No, carve it into the sea. That's where I belong." As the fever consumed her, the guards whispered that death would claim her before the gallows did, and so it came to pass. One night, as the storm raged outside, thunder rolling like cannon fire, Mary Reed breathed her last in the filth of the jail, her chains rattling one final time before falling silent. The official record would later state she died of a violent fever, buried in the parish yard of St. Catherine's. Yet Anne Bonny, sitting beside her body in the flickering light, knew the truth. Mary did not die defeated, but defiant, even in her final breath. "They'll not forget you," Anne whispered to the cold body of her friend, her sister Enid. "I'll see to that." And as dawn broke, the guards dragged Mary's lifeless form away, her body swallowed by the earth, her legend left to the sea. But Anne's story did not end there. Alone now, she faced the gallows without her comrade, her shield gone. Whispers followed her, even in chains. Some said her father's influence bought her freedom. Others claimed she escaped in disguise. Still others insisted she too hanged, her body buried in unmarked soil. The truth was lost in shadows. But one thing remained certain. Anne Bonny walked into history carrying Mary's fire, her promise to keep her name alive. And so Mary read, the woman who had lived as a man, who had carved her place among pirates, who had defied the world itself, lived on not in flesh but in story. A ghost in the waves, a whisper in the wind, a legend etched into the salt and blood of the Caribbean. And yet, even as Mary's body lay cold in the ground, questions lingered. Had she truly died that night in prison? Or had the fever been a ruse, her greatest disguise of all? A final trick to slip past the gallows and vanish into the sea? Some swore, years later, that a scarred sailor with fierce eyes fought aboard another ship, her voice low, her movements familiar. Others claimed to have seen her in Havana, older, harder, still in breeches, still carrying a cutlass. The sea never gives up her secrets easily, and Mary Reed's may have been her greatest treasure, that she could not be caged, not by gallows, not by fever, not by death itself. And as Bonny sat alone in her cell, listening to the gallows creak in the wind, she whispered into the darkness, "Mary, if you still walk this earth, let the world tremble, and if you don't, may the sea carry you forever." And in that silence, broken only by the rattle of chains, the legend of Mary Reed grew, sharper and darker, her story unfinished, her disguise eternal. The storm that rolled over Port Royal the night Mary Reed's body was carried from her cell seemed almost deliberate, as if the heavens themselves raged against the rope and iron that had claimed her, thunder shaking the stones, lightning splitting the sky in jagged white scars. And in the jail, Bonny sat with her back to the damp wall, listening to the storm and to the whispers of the guards who spoke of Mary as though she were already legend. Some saying she had fought harder than any man aboard the Revenge, others muttering that she had been cursed from birth, destined to burn brightly and die young. But Anne only sat in silence, her hands curled into fists, because she knew that Mary had lived, not cursed, but chosen, every disguise, every blade stroke, every defiance a decision carved out of a world that sought to deny her existence. Days passed, and the trial's aftermath fell upon the city like rot. Rackham's body rotted in chains by the harbour as a warning. Other pirates hanged in rows, their corpses swinging in the wind. But the names on every tongue were not theirs, they were Mary and Anne's. The women who had fought like men, who had defied gallows and expectation alike. Anne, still shackled, was paraded once more before the magistrate, her belly proof of her reprieve, and again the whispers filled the hall. Some wanted her dead at once, child or not, while others argued she should live as a curiosity, a reminder of the price of lawlessness. Anne met their stares without fear, her voice sharp as a cutlass when she spat. The law fears women with blades more than pirates with fleets. Hang me or free me, but no, this you'll not silence us. Her words, recorded by those in attendance, rang like prophecy. The court postponed her sentence, and she was returned to her cell. And then history falters, for from that moment Bonny's fate grew tangled in rumor and myth. Some claimed her wealthy father in Carolina pulled strings, bribed officials, and smuggled her out, vanishing into the colonies where she bore her child and lived in shadow until old age. Others swore she escaped by cunning, bribing a jailer, slipping away dressed as a maid. Her fire undimmed as she fled into the Caribbean night. Still others whispered she hanged after all, her body buried in unmarked soil beside Mary's. No one knows, and that is how legends are born. But what of Mary? That is the question that would not die, the whisper that clung to every port, every tavern, every shanty sung by sailors long after her grave was filled. Some swore she had never died of fever, that the corpse buried in the parish yard was another prisoner, swapped in some midnight deception, and that Mary had been spirited away, her disguise one last time saving her from the gallows. Years later, tales surfaced of a scarred sailor in Havana, broad-shouldered, sharp-eyed, who fought duels with a ferocity that reminded old men of the pirate days. Others claimed she was seen in Tortuga, her hair cut short, her voice low, drinking rum in silence as if daring the world to recognize her. Could it be true? Did Mary cheat death itself, her disguise so complete that even history was fooled? Or was it wishful thinking, the sea refusing to let go of a spirit too wild to be caged? What is certain is that her name endured. Sailors spoke of her in awe. Mothers whispered warnings of her two daughters who dreamed too boldly. Ballads carried her story from tavern to tavern, each singer adding their own twist. Mary as a demon, Mary as a saint. Mary as the woman who lived as a man so she could live at all. And in the end, perhaps that was her greatest victory, not the battles fought, not the treasure seized, but the truth that she had forced the world to see her, to remember her, to fear and admire her in equal measure. For what is piracy, if not the refusal to bow, to obey, to be forgotten? Mary Read had been born into disguise, forced into lies by desperation. But she had transformed that disguise into a blade that cut her name into the bones of history. Whether she died in fever or walked away into the night in another skin, her legend remains unfinished, her story a question mark scrawled across the sea. And so the echo of her voice lingers still, whispered in the crash of waves against the hull, in the rattle of chains in forgotten cells, in the salt wind that stings the face. I was Mary Read, and I lived as I chose. But there is one last whisper, darker still. Sailors who have anchored near Port Royal swear that on stormy nights, when the wind rattles like chains and the sea glows faint with lightning, a figure can be seen standing on the shore near the old gallows, hat pulled low, cutlass at her side, her face hidden in shadow. Some say it is the ghost of Mary Read, restless, watching, waiting. Others swear it is no ghost at all, but the woman herself, older, harder, who never died, who simply became the sea's secret, walking still among us in some disguise too perfect for the world to break. The truth is lost, buried like treasure in the waves. And perhaps that is how Mary would have wanted it, not a story with an end, but one that keeps the world guessing, fearing, and admiring. And if you listen close, you'll hear it too, not in books, not in courts, but in the hush between cannon fire and storm, the sound of a woman laughing, blade in hand, daring the world to try and hang her. Perhaps Mary Read truly died of fever in a Jamaican jail, her body lying beneath an unmarked stone. Or perhaps her final disguise was her most brilliant yet, cheating not only the gallows but history itself. The sea never tells, but it always remembers. And if you thought this tale was wild, wait until you hear the next untold pirate story. Hit that subscribe button, keep your lantern lit, and remember, the sea always keeps her secrets.